Hello, everybody. Welcome to the lineup. My name is Lily Dute. I'm a publicist over here at Soho Press, and I am so pleased to bring you three authors for our April event. Of course, as always, before we hop into speaking with our authors, we have a little bit of housekeeping to do, so we'll run through that very quickly. We could not do this series without the help of Mystery to Me Books, which is based in Madison, Wisconsin. They're an indie bookstore who does an incredible job helping us with this lineup. So if you feel so inspired to purchase any of the books that we're talking about today or anything else that's sitting on your TBR, there's a little green buy button here at the bottom of your screen. And that will take you directly to their website so you can help support them and make sure that the lineup can continue to happen. We have a lot of familiar names in the chat today. Thank you all for coming back. It's so nice to see you again. Our next event is going to be on May 27th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Central Time. And it's going to be a special preview of Karen Oden's new heist novel, An Artful Dodge, which will be a very great way to kind of kick off the summer. All of these events are live streamed and recorded. If you'd like to come back and revisit the event again, or if you'd like to send it to a friend, you can just use this very same link. We also upload them to our YouTube page after the fact. And finally, we'll be giving away some gift cards at the end of this event, as always, to Mystery to Me. So make sure you stick around to the end to find out if you've won. And I think without further ado, we'll be doing a Q&A at the end, like we always do. So if you have questions for anybody, feel free to put them in the chat, or right below the chat button on the right side of your screen, there's a Q&A bubble. You can put them in there as well. We'll be fielding those. And now, without further ado, I am pleased to introduce the authors that are joining us today. Beginning, as a passionate advocate of lifelong learning, Frances Crawford was delighted to graduate with distinction at age 60 from Glasgow University's creative writing program. Frances grew up in North Glasgow and credits the people of Postle Park and Milton as her writing inspiration. She still lives in Glasgow with her family and likes libraries and punk rock. A Bad Bad Place is her debut novel, and it's now available for purchase wherever you get books. Frances, thank you so much for joining us for your first lineup.
Hey, hi everyone.
Writer, translator, and college professor Teresa Dovalpage is a Cuban transplant firmly rooted in New Mexico. She is the author of 3 short story collections, 4 plays, and 14 novels, including the Havana mystery series. She lives with her husband, 1 dog, and 2 mini barn cats. And her new novel, The Novel Detective, is out everywhere in July. Teresa, thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
And finally, Diane Josefowicz is the author of Guardian and Saints, Stories, La Heure du Temps, 1985, and Ready, Set, O, a novel. She is also the author, with Jed Z. Buchwald, of 2 histories of Egyptology, The Zodiac of Paris and The Riddle of the Rosetta. She serves as managing editor of the Victorian Web, the internet's oldest and largest website devoted to Victoriana. A graduate of Brown University, she holds a PhD in History of Science from MIT and an MFA in fiction from Columbia University. She lives in Providence, Rhode Island, and her new novel, The Great Houses of Pill Hill, is out next Tuesday. So thank you, Diane, for joining us right before your pub date.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
We have a really interesting theme today. We always do, but I think I'm especially excited to talk about place today, as some of us are going through some sort of tumultuous spring weather. It's kind of nice to think about other places that maybe we could be. All 3 of these novels are really great at immersing us in places that perhaps we haven't been before. So I'd kind of like to start with a group question. We're talking about A Tale of 3 Cities, which means that setting plays a really large role in the stories that we're discussing. Can you each tell us a little bit about where your novels are set, and perhaps maybe to what your novels are about, just to give a brief setting? Teresa, can we start with you?
Sure. Well, mine takes place in Havana, where I was born, so I know the city quite well. I lived in Cuba until I was 30 years old. And people sometimes think of Havana as a place frozen in time. And there is some truth to it, no, with the old American cars, which appeared in my book, and the peeling walls and all that. And I mean, these are kind of cliches, but they're also real. I think that there is so much more to Havana. I mean, for those of us who were born there, it's kind of a collage. It's a mix of the old buildings and the new stuff that has been built in the last 50 years. And then, of course, the scarcities and the blackouts and the trash, sadly, the trash all over the place. So I tried to put all that together in the book, showing it from the time of my youth, from 1980, and now how Havana looks like in the 21st century.
That's great, and you do it in a really interesting dual timeline that I wanna ask you about, later, so thank you for that. Frances, do you wanna, tell us about Bad Bad Place? Or maybe if we're having mic troubles, maybe we can pop over to Diane.
Sure, I'll jump in. So I guess what I want to say about the Great Houses of Pill Hill. So it's a book about an interior decorator who she has the biggest commission of her career, restoring a historic home for two very rich clients. And the story starts to unspool when one of those clients, the husband, it's a husband-wife team, is found dead. In the house, and she's it's complicated because she's sleeping with him, so that adds a layer of complication. But she's got a whole lot of backstory too, that comes into the story. And so that's kind of the précis of this book. The setting of it is a fictional town called New Preston. It's in the American Northeast, and I chose that setting because I wanted a place that's a little bit like Providence, where I live, which is a small town. But kind of in a way a big city. So it's people are cheek by jowl. Like we're very close to our neighbors all the time, and I wanted a place like that was small but also big, inward looking, but also with connections to larger cities. So, for instance, Providence is very close to Boston, and I'm in and out of New York very easily as well. And those influences come in and out, and they also kind of come into New Preston, which is a place where Cookie, the main character, is from there, but no one else in the town really is. They're all transplants from other places, and they make the place kind of dynamic, as well as other things. So that's the setting of the book. I want to underline, though, that I chose it really purposefully because a small town, the story that I'm telling could not take place anywhere but a small place where people are gossiping, everyone knows everyone else, everyone's watching everyone else's house and landscaping and all this, like everyone's in everyone's business all the time. And that helps, that really was useful for me in writing the book in terms of just moving the plot along, because so much information was moving between the characters all the time due to it being a small town.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. Frances, can you hear us again?
I can, yes,
Perfect.
thank you. Sorry.
Don't be sorry. That refresh button is our best friend. Frances, can you tell us a little bit about A Bad Bad Place and where it's set?
Yes, A Bad Bad Place is set in Glasgow in Scotland. Glasgow is a huge city in Scotland. It's one of the biggest. And I'm sure if any of you have heard of Glasgow, you will have heard about how it's full of hard men, it's crime-ridden, poverty, drug deaths. It has a terrible reputation in the world of Glasgow. And A Bad Bad Place is a crime novel. There is a crime at the centre of the novel. But I wanted to show a different side to Glasgow, a side where people are decent and good, where they look after each other, even in terrible circumstances. And this one particular area of Glasgow, Postle Park, has a worse reputation than most of Glasgow. And I wanted to reclaim Postle Park as the good place that I remember growing up. So, although a dreadful crime has taken place, and I mean, I'm not rose-coloured spectacles. I'm not trying to claim that these things do not exist in Glasgow, but I just want to show a different side to the city.
Yeah, and you really do. I want to talk about that a little bit more, but Diane, I apologize, it's my dog. Diane, I want to ask you, because you kind of talk about how New Preston is like a small place and how this story could only take place in a small place. And I think that dovetails kind of well with the name of the book. So could you tell us a little bit why you call it The Great Houses of Pill Hill?
Okay, so this is kind of complicated. The title of the book actually is one of the things that came almost dead last for this book. The idea of a pill hill. So there are many Pill Hills in the United States, and so it's the name of a neighborhood. But there's one in Chicago. I think there's probably one in Boston. And what they have referred to historically are places where medical professionals live, where doctors live, and that's typically. If it's up a hill, it'll somehow sooner or later get known as Pill Hill. And so here in Providence, on the east side of Providence, for a long time, that's where I live. We live on what was called Pill Hill. So the name kind of came out of my experience of being in a place that that does have this sort of nickname, or it did have it historically in the 19th century. The Great Houses piece, I think it just came sort of naturally from thinking about what's on in a wealthy neighborhood like that's up a hill. The and then I guess once those two pieces came together, that was the title. The previous title was called The Ministry of the Interior. That's what the first title was, and that's the name of my interior decorator, Cookie Cook. That's her business, is called the Ministry of the Interior, and that was the book's title for the longest time until I was finally able to land on this. I think a much more interesting title. But there are many Pills Hill. They're all over the place.
I love that. And we talk about the interior quite a bit in your novel in many ways.
Yes.
This is kind of a journey that Cookie goes on, just like thinking about the interior. Can you, just since we're on this topic, can you kind of elaborate on that idea in relation to the novel?
Yeah, so interiors. So there are so many interiors in this book. Obviously, she's an interior decorator. The idea of a domestic interior space is at the center, really, of her imagination, and of her work life. And she really cares a lot about this. At the same time, she can't afford the renovations that she plans for people, right? So her own home is much simpler and less luxurious than the domestic spaces that she is charged with creating in her day-to-day work. And so there is a kind of a tension around, kind of what sort of domestic interior you might have, and who gets that, who designs it, who implements it, and then who gets to use it and enjoy it. That's part of the story that I'm telling. But at the same time, there are other interiors. So there are a number of doctors, there's two psychiatrists in the story whose business it is the ministry of the human interior, right? The psychological interior. And so there's an idea of interiority of people's interiors that is also present in the book, particularly through the interventions of these two psychiatrists who play different roles in the plot. And so there are a couple of, that's what I'm kind of getting at when there are a couple of meanings of interiors. And also the book itself is for the most part told through a first person perspective. And so Cookie's interiority is it's almost always on the page. And that, I think, is something else it wasn't a foregone conclusion when I was writing the book that it would take that form that is so close to Cookie and stays inside her mind so much. But she's a character. She started to talk. And once she was in my ear, there was no stopping her. And once I said, okay, this is how it's going to go, like the book really flowed from that moment. And I stopped resisting that aspect of it. So there's kind of three levels of interiority here.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like that's such a cool lens to have in your, of course, we had spoken before I got the pleasure, or I was in the middle of reading the book when we spoke about this at first. So it's kind of a nice lens to think about when you're going through the process of reading the book, like all the ways that the interior makes an appearance in the novel. Teresa, I have
a short question
go
about Cookie. Did Cookie come to you already formed in which all their works, or did she change over the writing of the book?
I answer that really quickly. Totally formed, absolutely formed. The voice was already there. She sounds a little like Julia Child in my ear. So there's like a little bit of that Boston noise in her voice. Yeah, she was just about fully formed. In the final part of writing of the book, like literally the last round of editing, there was a degree of memory that I had been able to excavate with Cookie, that there was there were new layers to her character. I was really surprised to find that so late in the process. But yeah, Teresa, she was there fully formed. I'm going to throw that back to you because I have questions about Teresita and, she seems so complex to me. And did she arrive in exactly that complexity for you?
Well, Teresita is me, so it was there all the time, except for a few details of when I came to the United States and when Teresita came. It's me, spoiled, nerdy, quirky.
So cool.
Yeah, Teresa, I was going to ask you about this because the novel detective is sort of a departure from you. You dabble in metafiction a little bit. So I kind of wanted to ask, tell us about the decision to place yourself loosely in this story and why pursue metafiction for this novel?
I didn't even know it was called metafiction to begin with. When Taz told me, say, okay, I Google it. Yeah, that's what it is, metafiction. But anyway, I just wanted to write about the building. La Manzana is an old building, iconic building in Havana. And for a long time, I have wanted to have a story set there because it's such a mysterious place. So I started thinking of the characters, friends of mine, teachers, former teachers of mine in Cuba that would be in the story and the building. And I said, "Pero what about me? ¿Y yo qué? I will put myself there too, since all the people are going to be there." And that's how I said, well, instead of being somebody else, it's going to be me, Teresita, as a student that sort of witnesses a crime. And then as a mystery writer, since I was already in the meta thing, okay, I'm going to go myself and solve the crime. So it was just a fun process to write about myself, changing a few things that, just for the sake of the plot. But it was so much fun. And then, of course, I have some friends ask me, am I in the story? So menos, yes, you are kind of in the story. But it was really interesting to do that, and I plan to continue doing that. I mean, I plan to continue being meta.
I love that. That's so funny. I want to talk about La Manzana a little bit more because that is kind of like the centerpiece of your novel. But Frances, can you hear us? Are you here?
I can, I'm back. Yes, I think there's something going on in Scotland that is interfering with everything.
No, thank you for riding the wave for us. I want to ask you, while you're here, A Bad Place is your debut novel, but you've been working on it for a long time. Could you talk to us kind of about the publishing story of A Bad Place?
Well, I had never intended being a novelist. I had never intended writing anything. I reached my mid-50s and I thought, this is the point in my life where I either get a motorbike or I go back to education. And I mean, I'm not getting on a motorbike. So I went back to university and I did a master's in creative writing. And by luck, my tutor was Louise Welsh, who is a really famous Scottish crime writer. And it was during her class that the inspiration was incredible. She set my path for me, So I wrote the novel basically for Louise because Louise advised me that a short story, it could carry the novel, So I wrote it for myself and for Louise. So I wrote it in dialect. That's one of the reasons, because I was writing for myself. So I apologise to everyone who struggles with the Glasgow dialects, and I hadn't thought that maybe in America you don't have iron brew, or you don't know what manky is, or so I'm glad that Soho put on a glossary for you. It was a big surprise to me when anyone else was interested in the novel, and I'm really very, very grateful, especially at my age. I'm 63, and I'm a debut novelist. Not two things that go together generally, so I'm very grateful.
Because you brought up the motorbike, we need to talk about sort of the punk influences that happen throughout A Bad Place, because the book on its own is very immersive. Your writing is incredible and really brings us to Postle Park, but it also feels immersive because of Janie's love of punk music, which is something that you share. Can you talk about that and why you wanted to include it in A Bad Place?
In a lot of ways, I set it in 1979 just simply so I could talk about punk rock. I'm such a fan. I mean, it was the era where I first got into music, and there's a point in your teens where when something grabs you, you're fanatical about it, absolutely fanatical. And for me, that was punk rock. And Janie likes punk rock in a way of showing that the way that she throws herself into things, she finds a dead body and becomes absolutely fanatical about finding out everything she can about the dead girl, about the dead woman. So there's a mirror between that and the way that she loves music. And children are like this, young teenagers, they become obsessive with things. They collect everything to do with it. And Janie's starting to wear punk clothes, and it lets me explore the time as well. The late 70s were a time in Britain where policing was very, very poor, very flawed, and by setting it in this era, I could explore that and also ask the writer, has anything changed? On the media, the way that media treat the victims. There's a lot of victim shaming that was prevalent then that I don't think has really improved much now. So there was a lot of reasons for setting it in the late 70s. Mainly punk rock though, if I'm honest.
And Frances made a really wonderful playlist with Large Hearted Boy, if you want to go give some of those songs a listen. I think it's a good companion to the novel. This is an interesting group of books because we don't often have young protagonists, but we have two in the conversation today. So I want to toss it back, Teresa, to you to talk about Teresita, because I think viewing crimes through the eyes of young protagonists can be an interesting way to consume crime fiction. It's not something that we see all the time. And we've already spoken about how this is metafiction, Teresa. But you started talking about La Manzana de Gomez. So I'd love to hear more about that and what part it plays in Teresita's story, as well as the older Teresa that we get to hear from in your novel as well.
Okay, so La Manzana is a real building, and it was one of the first indoor malls in Latin America. It was built in the 1920s or finished in the 1920s. At first, it was a beautiful building with cafeterias and stores and consulates, everything. And then the owner, the original owner of the building, was killed there. It's also a true thing. Just a few years after the building was completed, he had an affair with a lady or something happened with her. The thing was that the husband of the lady killed him there, right there next to La Manzana. He was crossing the street from Parque Central, from Central Park to La Manzana, and there was the offended husband, and he killed Andres Gomez Mena. That's why it was called La Manzana de Gomez. So manzana means block, it also means apple. So he was killed very close to the building, and then his ghost was supposed to be inside the building. By the time I started attending school at La Manzana, most of the stores and the consulates and whatever had been closed. It has 5 floors, and only the last floor, the 5th floor, was entirely operating, and the ground floor has also some stores, a pharmacy where my mother worked. That part is absolutely true. I mean, all the setting that I have there is true. The pharmacy La Central was there, and a cafeteria and some stores. But in the 70s and beginning of the 80s, the building was in total disrepair. And then it was a perfect setting for a mystery. You remember when I was a teenager thinking, no, I should have, a book should happen here. This is the perfect setting for a mystery novel. And then later on in 2017, Havana went through kind of a renovation and La Manzana was restored, and now it is a luxury hotel. So I thought the contrast, from the time of my youth and the original Manzana and the new Manzana, that could make for an interesting story. And of course, well, Teresita had to be there because she attended school there, and the crime happened in La Manzana. And also the adult Teresa, when other character that is based on me, goes back to solve the crime, where she has to go to La Manzana, of course, because that's the scene of the crime. I thought about staying one night in the hotel, but the price was like $500 per night. And I have my mother's house in Cuba, so I don't, no. Well, that part of the research will not be included there. But when I went back to Cuba, before finishing the book, I went to the hotel and I look at it and I try to make it as true to reality as possible.
I was gonna ask if you had ended up staying there, but that's a lot. Yeah.
Too much. But I went. I went and snooped around. I went to the terrace because that part was public access, and just put my nose everywhere. Yeah, but as for staying as such, I know, mijita.
So we've talked a little bit about all of the places where these books are based. And so something that's also cool is you all kind of grew up in these places that you are now writing about in your novels. How have these places changed from when you were growing up to 2026? And whoever wants to jump in can jump in.
I think I'll jump in right away and just say it is so gentrified. So like that, the gentrification has been a major force for change, both, and I think I would call it both good and bad in the neighborhood that I would consider most closely connected with Pill Hill in Providence, but really all of Providence has become a little more tourist friendly. So I grew up outside Providence, and one of my earliest memories was being by the Providence River, and it was on fire due to the pollution and someone throwing a lit cigarette in there. And that was a kind of a common occurrence. It was kind of like, oh, there it is, the river's on fire again. This was, in the, I hate to say this, dating myself, in the 70s. And, since then, things have really changed a lot in Providence. And what I'm hoping to kind of do with Pill Hill is kind of put my finger on some of those changes in the long trail of, like what that means to be from a place and see it change like that, which Cookie is certainly, personally, she's herself an archive of that kind of memory. And she knows what New Preston was like before, the rich people arrived and turned all the sort of tumble down houses into, what they do is restore them, right? And so they're not new houses, but they've been, these houses have been sort of, their past glories in some sense has been recaptured. And that's it's a sort of an interesting aesthetic. It's an interesting orientation toward the present, toward housing, toward history. And it's also in connection with lots of social and political structures as well, because I'm certainly on the east side of Providence, which is what I know best. There are all kinds of restrictions in place in different neighborhoods for what you can do and can't do with the exterior of your historic home, right? So there are these other kinds of rules that guide construction here and restoration. And so I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent in terms of historic restoration, but definitely what's changed is that the surfaces have become a lot slicker around here. The housing stock has become a lot more expensive, and in many ways, it's interesting to see kind of people engaging with history in this way architecturally all over the neighborhood as they restore these homes. Other people, how have your neighborhoods changed?
Yeah, but I can say Glasgow has sort of reinvented itself in a sort of similar way, Dan. You know, Glasgow's been through so many reinventions. It's now a big tourist city. Oh, we have so many lovely things for people to come and see. If anyone's interested in a little Scottish holiday, Glasgow's a place to come. But Fossil Park itself, where my novel is set, that had to change because by about the mid-80s to 90s, heroin hit. It had a very, very bad heroin problem, and it became very lawless. The police just wouldn't attend. So they basically raised a lot of Fossil Park, just flattened it and rebuilt it. It's now so much better. And Glasgow itself, it's a far more cosmopolitan city. It has a better, more worldly outlook than it used to. It used to be very insular. We had a lot of sectarian problems, you know, like Northern Ireland, where it was Catholic Protestant kind of thing. And I'm very proud of the way that Glasgow tackled that. And so that's a great thing about Glasgow that has changed. It's definitely a different city in the late 70s, just not even physically, but in an outlook. The way it sees itself is so much more healthy now. So thumbs up to Glasgow, and Glasgow Tourist Board welcome you.
How about Havana, Teresa?
Havana have been kind of in a roller coaster, because at first it was a beautiful city with a lot of problems, but it was beautiful in the 40s and 50s. And later it kind of fell into disrepair in around 2015 or so. There was a revival. That's when La Manzana was renovated, and now it's back into disrepair. But this particular building, La Manzana de Gomez, the hotel, is a Kempinski Hotel. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's kind of in a bubble there. If you go and enter the hotel, you cannot even imagine all the bad things that are happening in the city at the same time, because like most hotels and touristy places, is very well taken care of. But Havana, so she's having like, hopefully someday we'll be in a state of calm and we all can visit. I wouldn't invite anybody to visit Havana right now, because like where my mother lives, she still lives there. There are blackouts almost every day right now, so it's not. But if you are staying in the Kempinski Hotel, well, there are no blackouts there, so well, it's the usual thing with Cuba. But that's how it is.
Yeah, thank you all. I think it's really interesting to talk about how things change, because obviously they do, and everywhere has a little bit of a different story. Teresa, since we're talking about your novel, I want to get back to this dual timeline that you employ here. And you were actually asked this question by Anjanette Delgado in an interview that you just did for Mystery Center, but I'm stealing her question because I think it's interesting. How did you arrive at using this narrative tool in this book, but also in several of your books prior?
Yeah, I actually started using it in my previous novel in the Havana Mystery series, in Lasting in Havana, because mostly because of emotional stakes. Now, in Lasting in Havana, the story is about Mercedes, is a young Cuban woman who is searching for her American mother who disappeared many years ago. And then I thought, well, will the reader care about the search? I mean, for that to happen, they have to know something about the person who was missing. So in that novel, I alternated between 1980s and 2018, so I could show Mercedes' mother's life in Cuba as it was happening. So it was kind of going back to the past, peeling back the layers of the past. so Mercedes could find clues to the president and to what happened to her mother. And then I kind of liked it as a narrative tool. And I thought, it worked at that time, let me use it again. And the same now with Teresa and Teresita, I wanted people to know, well, how was Teresita's life in Cuba and what was the issue with the other characters when we were studying there at the end of 1979, the beginning of 1980, how life was in Cuba and why the things that happened there, how was school in Cuba, that middle school is very different, or well, maybe not very, but quite different from middle school here. One question that I was asked twice was, well, didn't you have lockers there? No lockers. I didn't know what a locker was until I came here. And how the students all stayed in one classroom instead of moving around. So, I mean, I wasn't thinking of that when I wrote the book, but I think it helped not to have that dual timeline, how things were in Cuba in the 1980s when there was so little information coming out of Cuba, and well, how it is now. People know more about what's going on right now because of social media and all that. But how things were there was kind of, I think, a mystery for many people. So that was fun to use the dual timeline for.
I didn't know that about lockers. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't even know a locker. Why would you need a locker for? We got our own stuff around all the time.
Diane, I want to pop over to you really quick. We were talking before we went live about your acknowledgments, and folks who haven't been able to pick up the book yet, but who will go to their stores and purchase the book on Tuesday when it's out, or pre-order it here. You will notice that Diane's acknowledgments are very robust, and she mentions a lot of the research that she did for this novel, including the work of Frances Glessner Lee, who was a miniature artist, for lack of a better word. And this is a recurring thread throughout the Great Houses of Pill Hill, one that I was really interested in. So, Diane, can you talk to us about Frances Glessner Lee and
Sure.
the miniatures that we
Yeah. So let me tell you about the miniatures. So one of the things that Cookie does, her day job is interior decoration, but when she's not working and she's not on the clock, she's making miniatures of domestic interiors, right? So she's not renovating homes; she's actually kind of building little models of them, and she develops an interest in making reproductions in miniature of crime scenes, and so she makes these little models, and this it feeds into the plot and how she manages to unravel what's going on when her client is killed. And so that's how the miniatures play out in the book. Cookie is an artist of these miniatures, and so how I got into this. So some years ago, my daughter was little, and my mother-in-law gave her a dollhouse for Christmas, and she at the same time gave me a book called The Nutshell Studies of Unexplained Death by the photographer Corinne May Botts. And what this book is a series of photographs, because Corinne May Botts is a photographer, of little miniature crime scenes that were created by Frances Glessner Lee in the 1940s. And Frances Glessner Lee was a Chicago heiress to the Harvester fortune with some wonderful fine motor skills, I'll say, and a real interest in making miniature worlds. And so one of the things that she set herself to do was to start making miniature crime scenes. Right, she was interested in crime in addition to miniatures, and in the end, she made about 20 of these little miniature crime scenes that were based on real crimes, and were finally used to train detectives starting in the 1940s at Harvard. And I believe the miniatures are still held by Harvard, or I'm not sure about this. There might be one or two that are in Baltimore as well, and still used to train detectives. And so these crime scenes. These little crime scenes, Corinne May Botts photographed them, and she actually did such a wonderful job photographing them that they seem almost lifelike. in the photographs. And so that was my introduction to these to the work of Frances Glessner Lee. It was really it was sort of a sly joke from my mother-in-law, who was giving my daughter a dollhouse and then also kind of handing me this book, I think as if to say, yes, it's a dollhouse, but it's not all sweetness and light inside that domestic universe. And, here's another idea about the kinds of things that we all know go down. And so that's my story about how Frances Glessner Lee's work got into my novel and how I put it to use.
And a really appropriate
It's incredible
precursor to your book.
Yeah.
It's really incredible where ideas come from. Just people think that writers sit scribbling away and that they have a big book full of ideas, but it's tiny things like that, Diane, isn't it, that you would never imagine were going to inspire you, and something snapped, isn't it?
I think that's absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely. And I like the idea of using everything. I do feel like my own books are a little bit maybe overstuffed with the stuff that I'm interested in, but there is so much inspiration to be gathered from all over the place. And it isn't about just being at my desk and writing. That's actually really the least of it, for sure.
What about the Egyptian influence? That's something I wanted to know because you have written a lot about Egypt. Tell us about that.
Okay. So my first training was as a historian, and I'm a historian. My specialty, as it's come to be, I have my own specialty, is history of 19th century France, and particularly 19th century French Egyptology, 18th and 19th century. And so before I was really doing much fiction writing, I was working on 2 books in this particular scholarly area. And the second of them, The Riddle of the Rosetta, is an account of the decipherment of Egyptian hieroglyphics. And that came out in 2020. And since then, the book's done very well. So I think I want to leave that there. But it was as I was working on that book with my my co-author at Caltech, Jed Buchwald, I was also writing this novel, and I was finding like little bits and pieces of the work that I was doing on that book kind of were working their way also into this novel. Like, I feel like my own process is very leaky. My projects kind of bleed into one another. And so that's one of the influences, certainly, on this book. There is a room in the house that Cookie's renovating that contains, it's a room that contains a mural, and it's 19th century Egyptian kitsch that's painted on the wall. It's hieroglyphics. It's very, but these kinds of frescoes actually were and still are discovered in older houses. Instead of wallpaper, people often did put paint scenes on the walls, and sometimes they did have this kind of Egyptianizing cast to them. This was a fashionable thing to have, on your wall. But that said, so the Egyptian piece does come in different ways. That's one of the ways that it comes in. But I noticed actually in Teresa, in your book, and also Frances, yours, Egypt comes in both places there too. So Frances, you have a character who has an ancient Egypt project. Somewhere in the book, I have a note about that. And then Teresa, your characters are reading Death on the Nile. So I don't know. Like, I sort of was thinking, well, that Egyptian piece in my book is pretty weird. But in reading both your books, I thought, wow, it's kind of interesting how this also comes up. I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, well, in my case, it was because Teresita and I, when I was her age, had read Death in the Nile.
Read Death on the
And
Nile,
then
yeah.
it was nice to weave it in the story. And also because my husband and I went to Egypt not too long ago, and we love it, and we were on a boat on the Nile. So I thought, oh, that has to be there too. But yeah, now that you mention it, the 3 of us have some Egyptian references there.
It's all these little collections, all these tiny things that you keep deep inside you, and one day they will be useful.
I would never have pulled that out, Diane. That's so funny.
I'm sorry. for
No,
just
I
knowing
love
it.
that.
But I'm now like completely sensitized to it. Like where does kind of Egypt come in? But it does seem to keep coming up. It is a kind of I think it's a locus of mystery for Western, particularly for Western writers. Like when we think about things that are mysterious, often we think about Egypt sooner or later, right? That we do have this path that gets, and what we mean, and I say this as a 19th century historian, is our own idea of Egypt, right? Like this is a Western idea that shows up. It shows up again and again, and certainly in the Great Houses of Pill Hill, it's not, she's not, what they find is not an Egyptian archaeology site. This mural that's on the wall is from the 19th century, and it has its roots and its story inside the history of the house and the neighborhood. And so the house itself starts to seem like an archive of its own history because of what's kind of in the walls, behind the walls, and that's one of the things they discover as they renovate.
Love that. That's a really good point about like our own idea of Egypt, because not thinking about like the grander scheme of crime fiction, we kind of see this somewhat regularly.
Yeah, yeah.
Frances, you have talked a few times about like you never know when these little pieces of experience will come up and put themselves into your novels, will inform a larger idea. And sort of the crux of A Bad Bad Place is Janie is, of course, walking Sid Vicious, her dog, and comes across a body. And I wanted to ask you about this premise. Why was this kind of the spark? And also, is Sid Vicious based on a real dog?
Yeah, it's a kind of a trope in crime fiction where the body is always found by the dog walker, and you see it on TV shows and movies where the handsome cop will interview the dog walker and then send them home. What happens to them? It just, you go home and get on with your life, and I have always felt uneasy about that because so much in real life, so many times that it is a dog walker. It's enough to put you off having a dog, actually, that you will never have a dog in case you stumble on the body. But it's just that unease. What happens to that person's life? How do they piece their life back together? And when I did the research for this, I found a really surprising connection between the finder and the corpse. They believed that in some way the corpse was connected to them. Quite often they would follow the police report, turn up at the funeral. It's just that they believe in some way that death is part of their story, and that was why I wanted to explore that. And I thought as well, what happens if it was a child? What is the trauma? How magnified the trauma would be if the dog walker was a child. And so Jenny is out with Sid Vicious, who is not a handsome boy. Sid Vicious is the ugliest dog in Glasgow. He is huge. His fur sticks up. He has bald patches. And everyone is afraid of him, despite the fact that he's a very nice dog. I mean, he's very gentle and loving. And he is based on a real dog. We got this tiny wee puppy when I was a girl, just an ordinary sized puppy that my dad brought home from the pub, actually. And it grew and grew and grew until it was the size of a horse. There was just no room for him in our house. But we loved them, we really did. And it's that kind of thing where things can look frightening, but they really aren't. And you see that a bit as a trope in crime fiction as well. It's the scary looking person, the awful looking person who is the killer. And so Sid Vicious is a good dog. And he is based on a real one, unfortunately.
What was your dog's name, Frances?
The dog we had was black. He was Black Dog. And my dad was a big movie fan and called him Shaft. after the detective. It was originally, I think, Robert Rowntree, who was the original Shaft. So our dog was called Shaft, and we loved Shaft.
Thank you. I know Sid Vicious is, we love Janie and we love Nana, but I think we all really, really love Sid Vicious.
Yeah.
I want to ask you all my favorite question that I like to ask authors, but in the meantime, we're kind of coming up on our time. So if anybody has questions for Teresa or Francis or Diane, feel free to put them in the chat in the Q&A box, and we'll get to them. But my favorite thing to ask kind of at the end of these events is, what were some of the other, besides your own experiences, what were some of the books, the albums, the movies, any sort of like outside influence that you were interacting with while you were writing your novel? We've already heard about Francis's playlist, things of that nature. If people want some more like required reading outside materials while they're reading your book, what would you recommend?
So I was watching the series Happy Valley when I was getting started really revising the book, and I found it so interesting to have a central character who wasn't young, right? Who wasn't a movie star thin, who wasn't super attractive, as in Happy Valley, where the detective, it's a woman detective, and she's kind of in the slog of middle age, and not real, like she's the camera loves her, but she's not classically pretty, classically attractive. And I wanted to explore what it was like to write a character who had that kind of strength on the page, but was not I don't know, the sort of like an easily filmable heroine, for instance, like someone whose like interaction with the world was not immediately first filtered by how they sort of the question of beauty, right? And so this I think is for me was Happy Valley was one of those, was a series that for me really drove home how it was possible to have a character like this, and really that she really could be the center of the reader's attention without having to draw on a lot of these tropes of what she looked like, her attractiveness to others, like a lot of her, to take all that off the stage and let her other qualities come forward, right? Those qualities that she has, and I found this to be an interesting challenge while I was writing.
If I could recommend a book, if anybody actually liked the Glaswegian accent, if anyone wants more of it, James Kilman is the man. He writes the most beautiful of Glaswegian short stories. He also, a couple of years ago, he won the Booker Prize for how late it was, and someone counted all the swear words in it because it was just very, very sweary. But he does this beauty in language, the local language. I love James Kilman. You can probably tell. So if anyone likes the Glasgow accent, James Kilman's your man.
I listened to a lot of music from the 80s, like from the 70s and beginning of the 80s for my novels. So that's the only background that I can think of right now. And I didn't do any research because it was about what I knew. But the music, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones had been forbidden up to the beginning of the 80s. So that was something that at that time we were started to hear them on the radio. And then, of course, Cuban music from that time of Bam Bam and Rocío Dúrcal, Spanish singer. So it was music that brought me back to that time.
That's such a perfect combination. We got a show, we have a book, we have some music. That's perfect. Very quickly before we announce our gift card winners, what are you all working on now? And relaxing is a perfectly fine answer if you're just trying to live your life.
It is so hard
I'm
to
actually
talk about
working
one
on
part.
I'm working on the follow-up to A Bad Bad Place, which is 6 years after 1979. So there's still some good music in it. and it's revolves around one of the minor characters in it. His name is Martin, and Martin's a bit of an odd kid in it, and it's how he struggles with becoming a man and a very toxic sort of toxic masculinity of Glasgow and how Martin grows into adulthood. So
Interesting. I'm working on a follow-up in which I am again the detective. I'm still Teresa, not Teresita this time, and we are looking for Estrella's daughter who disappeared when she was a little girl, and we go to the Globe Theatre in New York. So I'm sorry, the Globe Theatre in London. So we may pass by Glasgow when we go back to London. Who knows? We just jump from here to there. Because of course I will need to do more research for that.
Research. So I've got a novel in progress. It's called Brainy Out of Pocket, and it follows a woman who she's on the bus on the George Washington Bridge between New York and New Jersey on the day that Chris Christie closes the bridge to traffic. She gets stuck on this bus, and so she walks off the bus. And she too is in the slog of middle age, that really kind of maybe the beginning of it. She's got a kid and a mortgage, and her life is bearing down on her, and it sucks. And she basically she takes a long walk around the city, and she gets into a lot of trouble as she does this. And one of the things I'm finding is that everywhere she goes, she creates an enormous amount of mayhem. And so I'm reading A Clockwork Orange, and that's like seems to be the book that has the most to do with Brainy Out of Pocket. And so Brainy is at the center of this. She's just off the chain, and so that's the book I'm working on. I don't know where it's going, but it is definitely occupying a lot of my attention these days.
Thank you all, Frances, Diane, Teresa. Thank you so much for joining us. This was such a wonderful discussion. I love talking about books that all are sort of in conversation with each other in surprising ways. So thank you all so much. We're going to announce our gift card winners. First, for our $25 gift card, we have Raquel Troyce. Congratulations. Thank you for tuning in.
Oh, Raquelita.
Yes. $50 gift card is for Lisa Miller. And our $75 gift card to Mystery to Me is going to Kim Brazovich. So we will all email you after this event at the end of before the end of the day with details for your gift cards. Congratulations. Thank you for joining us. And congratulations to all three of you on putting out such wonderful books this year. It's really been such a pleasure to work with you and talk with you about these novels. And congratulations to everybody else that gets to go out and read them. You're in for a real treat. Thank you all. We'll see you next time.
thank you, Lily.
Thank you.
Ciao, gracias.
Thanks, everybody.